Hey guys, Argent Templar here, with another episode of Better Know a Heresy. So this one's a bit harder than some of the others, because if you're talking about Arianism, you can give like a one sentence definition for it. Modernism's a bit more difficult because it's more an inclination or a worldview than a heresy. A heresy in the very simple, easy to define sense. Modernism refers to a range of ideas, inclinations, and thoughts that have taken shape largely since the Enlightenment, and if we go back even further, the Reformation. At the heart of it is the idea that the church needs to get with the times, that doctrine, dogma, ritual, tradition, etc., always needs to be subjugated to the needs of the moment and the present day. That is that um, the church needs to change with the times. The church needs to be based upon whatever the present moral, philosophical, sociological fashions are of the moment, and that I think at the core of this there is a obsession with novelty, like a dictatorship almost of novelty. That one must always be innovative, one must almost be new. There is a spirit of movement and change with a hatred of anything that is fixed or stationary. It's an just as I find conservatism is an uncritical preference for the past, modernism is an uncritical preference for the present and the future. Um, it's the idea. Whereas a conservative would probably say, "Oh, things were great 50 years ago," a modernist would say, "The present is better than any time in history. There's nothing that's better about any previous time. Everyone in this age is much smarter than anyone back in the day. We can just safely ignore anything people said prior to today." And we see this a lot with stuff like gay marriage. We have this idea that for all of human history, there was some sort of conspiracy to keep gays down, and that like gay marriage was just something they were fighting for, instead of it just being some crap they made up like 30 years ago. But because they don't think about the past, they infantilize people who aren't from their age because they have to be young, they have to be hip. And like the church fathers, those guys were just a bunch of old fuddy-duddies. They wrote in an old language. They wrote in some language that a bunch of like dead white men used. And we can't have that. We need hip and cool people running the church. So yeah, so we have that. Modernism in its current form largely is classical liberalism, which prioritizes the individual and individual freedom above all things. That is complete freedom of conscience. You don't need to be subject to any overarching moral or temporal or spiritual authority. You just do whatever you want. Unlimited rationalism. There's always been rationalists in the Catholic Church. That's never really been an issue. But it's the idea that we have to reinterpret everything in the form of rationalism. I'll give you an example. Rationalist reading of the Bible basically assumes miracles can't happen, um, which I don't understand what's so hard to accept about them. I mean, if you can create the heavens and the earth, like, and you can make the universe, I don't get what's so hard to accept that the guy who made the universe could walk on water. Like carving out stars with your hands, that's completely okay, but walking on water, that's just too far. So, an attempt to explain away all the miracles in the Bible, um, just a rejection of things that people thought were superstitious in previous eras, often without any real changes. Because, I mean, there were times in history where we did have superstitious ideas, like that the devil caused plagues or something like that. But it's not just rejecting stuff in face of change. I mean, I'm just trying to clarify here because the Catholic Church is always they've been cautious about it, but it's not as if science hasn't changed their views on things. It's not as if heliocentrism, once it was kind of explored and firmly established, didn't become the de facto doctrine. It's not as if they didn't accept evolution. It's not as if they didn't accept the Big Bang, etc. Um, so I just want to keep that in mind. It's not reevaluating your opinion based on new evidence is not modernism. Modernism is uncritically preferring the present. It's also not. It's also not an exception. It's not even accepting that things change. I mean, the church has changed over time. Uh, it isn't the same church it was. I'm not saying it's not a continuation, but it's different than it was in the day of the apostles. Stuff changes, culture affects the church. But what modernism states is that there can't be a balance, there can't be any process to this, there can't be certain things that you can't change, there can't be certain core doctrines which are inviolable, that cannot be altered. It says everything has to be subject to the present. The church must be subject to the state, which is kind of a common one. The church has to accept gay marriage because modern society says it has to accept gay marriage. The church has to accept divorce and abortion, not because of any evolution in theology, not because of some moral argument, not because of an advancement in science, but because it's hip and cool. And I know I keep saying hip and cool, and you're probably like, that kind of stuff wasn't trend in during the 90s. But that's just kind of the attitude these people have. We're going to have liturgical dancing. We're going to have a clown mask. We're going to have random statues of lions and stuff like that. Like, that's the kind of stuff that, like, modernists do. And then in the middle we have kind of a traditional Latin mass. And I'm not even a hardcore traditionalist. I'm just pretty conservative. Um, I accept that things have changed since Vatican II and things have changed in the 20th century. Um, I personally don't. I'm against modernism, but I'm not completely on board with all the traditionalist talking points. I'm broadly sympathetic to the movement, but I'm not exactly on board with everything. Um, So basically, the idea is, let's see here. In this way, we may define modernism as the critique of our supernatural knowledge according to the false postulates of contemporary philosophy. I think that's a pretty good definition, actually. It's the idea that any church moral teaching, any church um, theological or metaphysical claim should be challenged based on contemporary philosophy. Once again, I can't stress this enough. This isn't about having a discussion about something. This isn't about reevaluating based on new arguments or new evidence. This is just about purely the idea that my feelings mean that we have to change things. There's no reason other than that. You can't find a theological justification in the Bible and in tradition for gay marriage. You just can't. Like, people are saying, like, oh, Jesus never said it was wrong. That's because the idea was invented like 30 years ago. I mean, if the Bible was going to include every novelty and invention and condemn them individually that was invented, that would be like a book 20,000 pages long. Um, I think it's pretty clear what traditional teaching on that topic is. But people are just opposed. People just kind of go along with it because it's trendy and it's of the moment. So that's kind of the way I think of modernism. Um, and I'm not saying, once again, things change. History is always a fluid force. Um, my issue with modernism and liberalism and leftism in general is it doesn't look at any of these things critically. I mean, I came to most of my far right views just by looking at the data, looking at the historical, the flow of history, looking at whether or not things made people happy. Like, a lot of these things I just oppose for the simple reason that I don't think they work and I don't think they make people happy. I think they make people miserable, and I think they make them shells of what they used to be. So that's my thoughts on modernism. Hopefully I explained it. This is Argent Templar signing out.